Evening. Ah, Danger Mouse. Yeah, migraines suck. I've only had one, I think, once in my whole life, and it was awful. So yeah, I feel for you. So, what are we doing? Caravella. It's Sunday, isn't it? Yes, so I figured we would carry on a bit from last week with the work we were doing on the bridge, and I thought I'd share something that Delta posted on Discord. Where are we? Here we are. So this was Delta's idea for how to lay the bridge out, and I think, yes, something like this. I think I want to move, or give the captain more space in the middle to walk around the holo display. But yeah, something like this. Certainly very much in that ilk. So, if we hop on to SketchUp. Oh yeah, the other thing I was going to do is this. So, I basically built the ship around the geometric center being this staircase. So, as you can see, this blue line indicates where the middle of the world is. I figured that would make a nice center point. But we consistently don't have enough room for stuff on the Caravella. So if we just stick another segment in there, then all of a sudden, in fact, if I turn off the deck 1 stuff a minute, where we have the bridge here and the staircase was just immediately behind it, this gives us a whole other segment for things like a meeting room, a bathroom, and any of the other stuff we need, like in the admin area for the bridge. It just gives us breathing room to have that extra space. And then with the rest of the ship, it also gives us room for maybe only having sickbay on one side rather than having to have it cross across a corridor, having a couple more crew quarters and not needing to double bunk quite so much, and just room for something else if we need it, which I'm sure we will. Yeah, still no room for a bowling alley on this one, sadly. But yeah, so it's not changing the silhouette too much. It is just extending the ship slightly, but it gives us a lot of extra room across 4 decks. And I think I might, with the back section here, I might bring this out a little bit further as well, just so it's a bit more shapely, because if we've got a longer nose section, then I think it's going to look a little bit narrow without a bit more of a wing at the back there. So we'll just extend that out slightly. It means that the engines and the ring will be a little bit further away from the hull, but ultimately I think that will look nicer. I mean, it's, you know, the ring's already quite far from the hull, so there is room to extend that out, but I think extending the engine pylons a little bit too, it just gives us more breathing room, and that also means we can fit in some fuel tanks that we don't actually have room for right now, because if we turn on this, so we've got the sublight engines here, and they are with built-in tanks and coolant, so it's all part of the engine pod, but then there's no room for the crew to maneuver once you're in there, so we need somewhere else to store commodities. So if we had a much wider section here, then we've got room for more tanks. I mean, we've got some tanks in there anyway for the RCS thrusters, but if we open this up a bit more, then we can have some much bigger tanks for the engines, and then we don't need to store it in the engine pod itself. So it just gives us more commodity space. But yeah, so adding that extra section there doesn't change the silhouette much, but does give us a lot more room. So I think we will go ahead and do that at some point. Yeah, and it needs a spoiler, of course, definitely. Giant shopping trolley handle across the back. Okay, so what we need to do, hang on, I've got my foot trapped in a footrest, there we go. Yeah, so if we take what I basically did last week, and then we will try and kind of work towards something like this. I like the fact that it's a central raised platform. I think that's quite nice. We'll probably have a dual railing going around it, and potentially like a little control panel on the railing as well, which could be quite nice. It also means we can set the consoles back slightly, which means we don't need to try and squeeze in some walk space there, because one of the issues we had was that out of my face. Hang on, sort the camera out. With the angle of the ceiling there, you don't have enough vertical height to walk around the outside without banging your head on beams. So by moving the consoles out, it means that is no longer walking space. So you actually have to walk up and around there to get to it. It does mean that the separation between the command chairs and the helm is going to grow even further, but hopefully not by too much. So we'll see. We'll start modeling it and we'll see. Ah, thanks, Dabo. Alright, so I'm not going to go too high poly to begin with. So right now we've got a width of 1.5 meters for the middle section, which is probably about right, to be fair. But let's load it up in Engine a minute and have a proper look at it. So that's the 1.5 meters to there. So that's probably as big as we'd ever need for the central section, and then we'll embed the hollow emitters in the floor, shining upward rather than down, and we'll give them a little bit of a volumetric fog effect, like they're projecting something into 3D space. And I think we'll do a little railing around there with room for the control panel, and then we'll increase the walkway space around here, and then shift them back a bit. Yeah, we're getting there, Nassi. It's every time I clear off some of the blockers, we find a couple more blockers. Things like, well, right now in multiplayer, the fade to black that happens as you join the game, one is triggering on the server when clients join, which it shouldn't be doing, so I need to go through the replication and find out why that's doing that. And similarly, for the client itself, the fade to black sticks and then doesn't fade out again. So the message that gets sent through to tell it, right, you can stop fading to black now. The galaxy's generated, the character is spawned, fade into the game so the player can take control. That message is not received on the client. So when clients log into multiplayer, they just end up with a black screen. They can still run around and you can see things highlighting, but obviously their viewport is masked by this black screen. So that's obviously a blocker. We can't release the demo like that, so we need to fix that and make it work. And of course the reason it's doing that is because I had to redo the startup system, because we were having issues with the order of things starting up, which was causing various problems with the loading process. So of course fixing the loading process has now caused a bug in multiplayer. So it's like herding cats or stacking marbles. Like you fix one thing and something pops up over there. It's literally like whack-a-mole. But we'll get there. We'll get them all fixed. It's the nature of bug fixing. Yeah, I'm not surprised, AJ. It's it's probably something quite simple, and we know what it is. We know what's causing the bug. It's just identifying why it's causing the bug. We're switching to Epic's gameplay message subsystem in order to fire messages back and forth to trigger in-game events, and by default they should not replicate. And as far as I'm aware, they're not natively replicating, and yet they do. So I think because we're firing it from the player controller, I think it's firing it on the server, even though we're doing an isLocal controller check. I've got it right here in front of me. So where is it? Here. So when we start, we're doing isLocal controller. So we're just making sure that everything we do is local to the client only, be that the host or the joining client. All these actions need to only take place locally. So why is it that when we fire the ship ready event and it does the fade to black, so this event is received, that's just our debug, fade to black, why is that happening on the server when we're explicitly only doing those actions if we're the local controller? So it's little things like this that we just need to pick through the code and go, right, something's obviously happening here that shouldn't be happening. Like, why is this replicating to the server? This should not be firing on the server when clients join. So why is it doing that? But yeah, it's just the nature of code, isn't it? Things don't quite go as planned. most of the time. Yeah, well, player controller exists on both the server and the client, but even if I test this as a dedicated server, it's still doing it. And that's what this is all about. I mean, this flag is specifically to control whether or not it is the local copy of the player controller rather than the server copy. That's actually literally its job. So yeah, something somewhere is being ignored or something. I'll figure it out though. I always do. After much head scratching, I usually get there in the end. But that's a problem for later. Yeah, exactly, Firstus. It's like propping bottles up. No, I won't say this one's an engine bug. A few of them have been genuine engine bugs, but this one is me. I'm quite confident that it's a me problem, not an engine problem. Just want to make sure that the height of this is correct. So yeah, so that floor level would be the top of the metalwork. So then we want an extra 2.5 on top of that. Which is, so that's 1.1, so that needs to go up 2.5. Right, because that's our actual floor level for the carpet once we take the metalwork into account. So this, well, I suppose the base of it needs to go on the metalwork. Let's group that up before we do that. Okay, yeah, so that would be the base. And yeah, so this would be the center that's actually generating the hologram. So if we have that come up a little bit above the level of the floor, and then actually if we bring that up 5 more, because we want to create our actual walking space around it, which I think I set that to 1 meter. No, it's 1.5 as well. Okay, let's see if we can make that 2 meters. So if we expand that by 2 meters, that gives us 2 meters of walk space around the holo display, which should be plenty. Which makes that a raised platform, essentially. So if we group that, make it a separate object. So again, floor level would be there. Carpet level would be there. So we want it to be raised up above the level of the carpet by, we say 10, because we'll have a little step. And this one would have to be raised up a little bit further. Okay, and then we'll have space for our railing. Actually, if we want to keep the actual walkway itself exactly 2 meters, then we need to extend that beyond the walkway for the railing. Just join that up. Okay, and then we make the handrail 1 meter above where you're walking. I'll bring that in a bit, so I should bring that on both sides. So we want, I guess 2.5 that side, 2.5 that side. I should make it, yeah, about 2 inches. I need my tape measure. I keep taking my tape measure into the house and then realise I need it, because I find it much easier, like when you're trying to model things to human scale, if you've got a tape measure on you, then you can kind of like, you know, measure your hand and think, yeah, that's about right for a handrail. Yeah, to do something somewhat like that. Yeah. Yeah, can do. We can have cable runs underneath, absolutely. Okay, so with that kind of scaling, we're actually not pushing any of this back much at all, which is nice. And then we only really need railing around the sides. See, my desire for symmetry really makes me want to put these 2 side stations at 90 degrees. But I'm going to try and resist the urge. We have a 3D guy somewhere. Where's somewhere? Yes, we've got that one, but we also had a 3D guy somewhere. Don't know where he's gone, but yeah. So human for scale. Puts the handrail around about waist height. I generally go between 90 to 100 centimeters for handrails, which is kind of what you get in public spaces. Yeah, exactly, Caesar. We'll see how it looks. If it drives me mad, then I will make them at 90 degrees, but we should be able to live with it, hopefully. Okay, so not having walking room around the outside is a bit of a hindrance. So I'm wondering whether or not we do shave off some of this width. Because I'm just thinking about as you step down off of this platform, where are we walking on the bridge and why are we walking there? I suppose that's the question, isn't it? If we've got like just enough space to squeeze around the outside, then people will. But then at the same time, like, do we want crew members kind of traipsing through past the holo display if they're walking around to the front for some reason? Perhaps I'm overthinking that a little bit. Let's just stick a control panel on there and see how we are for space. So if we had what would be a fairly big display, I don't think it'll be this big, but that's a meter wide, and then we would, I guess, pivot that from around about there-ish. Maybe make that, yeah, I suppose 45 degrees will do. So we'd have to have some kind of bracket on there. So it would have to clamp onto the handrail. So that would be the command controls for controlling the display. So zooming, rotating, and whatever else is needed. And it would be easy enough just to clamp that onto there. And then we'll have some struts. Although I think it might be nice if we maybe have that come out, just to give us, because the holo display is obviously spherical, so if we make the handrail slightly wider, then the support can come out like that. Yeah, so the outer railing will be split so that you can walk up onto this. In fact, it will probably only have a railing in front of the consoles there, if at all, to be fair. I mean, I do like the concept of building the consoles and chairs and things into the base, so the base forms what is essentially the seating locations. So it's all like one thing practically. Could look quite nice. But yeah, the central handrail will be a complete handrail. There's no reason to go inside the holo display. I was going to say, there was no way that was 100 up. Yeah, so we would cut this probably like there. And maybe there. yeah, it's almost pointless having one at all. Obviously, we don't want to interrupt the chair there at all. I mean, we could have one behind the helm, but again, I don't think that's necessary. So here we've got the consoles, obviously part of the ring, which is nice, and I would do that, except for the fact we can't have curved screens. We can have a curved screen if it's straight, like these ones we can have curved, but not here, because of the way the UMGs work in Unreal. Now, one thing I was going to do was experiment with using a mesh-based UI rather than having a UMG-based UI. So we'd actually do all the UI screens within SketchUp and export them as models. So each window, each frame within the UI is actually a static mesh that we're just rendering, on top of each other to produce the UI screen with transparent materials on them. But the issue we have with that is text. So obviously we're generating text all over the UIs, so we would also have to render a whole bunch of text components which aren't animatable in the same way that the UMG text would be. So I'm still in two minds about whether to go with the mesh-based UI or an image-based UI. Mesh-based would be quicker. I can knock these up in SketchUp like in 10 minutes, so we'd be able to have a lot more diversity if we did it with meshes. But yeah, it does present challenges with, like, buttons and things will be fine because we can just do line traces for those, but yeah, text, and especially if we have like a curved UI, we can't curve the text using just the text render component. We'd have to come up with some other solution to that, or maybe have a small UMG panel on that as part of the mesh, maybe. But either way, we can't do screens like that at this point. It just won't support it. So what can we do? I guess let's sketch out the floors, and for that we need some chairs. I'm just going to just drag in something like that. But it's going to be massive. Oh no, it's the right size. Hurrah! Obviously this is a placeholder, we are not going to be using this. Yeah, interesting. I need to make some of these live components. I've never actually experimented with them before, but that could be useful for us. Let's get that footrest out, because who doesn't love a good footrest? That'll do. Right. So let's pretend that that's a command chair. Yeah, it's not far off, is it? So, like the Magellan, we're going to want a central column with some UI stuff on it. We've got things like the alert conditions. We want some controls for the holo display, above and beyond these ones, or maybe even a duplicate of these ones. Or maybe not, actually. Maybe we won't. That could be something sort of distinctly different about this ship, that the holo display controls are here rather than down here. But things like internal announcements, so like the PA system, there's going to be a bunch of things that the captain's going to want buttons for, so we'll make sure there's a central column for that. And then of course we have the platform itself. So we maybe have that at the same height. And again, if we go with 150 as our distance of choice, I shall have to use a curve with more segments because it's getting a bit polygonal. Right, how far from the middle are we? 510. Okay, so let's go with 500 then. So we'll double the number of edges. We'll make that 5 meters exactly. I suppose we'll steal that curve as well. I can do, yeah. I need to remember where I put them. Obviously we'd want to design this and make it a little bit nicer. Probably have a curve there. Maybe have the step curve round. Could be quite nice. And then, to be honest, that railing can come in, which means it might actually give us enough room around the outside without making the inside any smaller. So it's 80 degrees that way. $80 that way. That's a good idea. Actually, Lunara needs a logo, doesn't it? That's something we've not put any thought into yet. But yes, Lunara Industries, they do need a logo. It's currently raining very, very hard outside the office here, so if the stream goes down, it's because my Starlink has given up on life. Yeah, well, we do want a lot in the way of things like mission patches and just general in-universe stuff to kind of bring the universe to life a little bit. Give me a midpoint. There we go. Yeah, it's been quite bad around here as well. And then we made the mistake a few days back of covering the back garden with like thick black plastic to try and like kill all the weeds off, because we're going to pour a bunch of gravel on top of it at some point. So of course now there's basically a lake outside the office, which means I have to splash all the way into the house every time I need a wee or something. Yeah, one of the things with the main menu is we've had to make it a 3D object for VR. So because of that, we're dealing with transparency behind the menu. And within the game, like for the pause menu, I was going to make that 3D object as well. But it then reflects off of things because it's a 3D object in the world. So like when you bring up the menu, you see it reflected in windows, which just looks stupid. So what I might do is make the main menu 2D when you're in first person, but 3D when you're in VR, and just have that distinction between the two, so that we're not having those same issues in first person that you have in VR, which means the menu then doesn't need to be a transparent object, which is why it goes all weird when you turn off AA. Yeah, that's a nanite collision mesh thing. Actually, now you remind me. I was literally on my way to do that earlier. It's only the aft ones, as far as I'm aware, because we had. I'll turn on the ambient light a minute. Yeah, it was these ones. The like this door was causing issues. So if we turn on collisions, something was blocking it. Yeah, it was definitely this one. I'm sure it was a nanite fallback issue. Where are we? Can't remember how to view it now. They've moved all the... Ah, there we go. Since 5.6, everything's moved about the place. Ah, yeah, so it's not that there's geometry blocking. Okay, I'll have a look at that as well. But it'll be this. So that one's not too bad. But where the fallback mesh creates edges, like sharp edges like this, the character pawn thinks it's a slope. So it's like, oh, I can't walk up slopes that steep. So what we can do is, in order to improve the collisions, we can adjust the fallback mesh. So there. So if we do relative error, do that at like 0.1. You see that it's now generating more accurate collisions for that geometry. So it's still not the base mesh, so it's still low poly. It's just not as low poly, which means it's not quite as inaccurate. So the collisions for this should now be player traversable. And I will do it for those ones. And also these ones. I also need to rebuild the paths as well, because I noticed that the NPCs are trying to get through here where the door used to be, because they're a bit stupid. Yeah, so we've got a similar issue here. It's generating some awful collision geometry. So let's just go and do the same. So set it to relative error, set it to 10%, and there we go, better collisions. this one, which no doubt has the same problem. Yep. And problem fixed. Hang on a minute. Oh. Yeah, so a relative error of 0 is obviously the original mesh, which we don't want for collisions. We want simpler geometry for that, so 0.1. There we go. Now we have simple collisions. And both doorways would have had the same problem, so that's fixed that. So on the next build, that will be much betterer. Yeah, if all bugs were that easy to fix, I like those ones. They're nice and straightforward. It's just a geometry issue. It's yeah, it's these. Well, it's replication. It's the networking that that really causes a lot of issues in terms of bug fixing overhead. Because one of the problems you have with a multiplayer environment is that as much as you can test multiplayer in engine by launching like 2 versions of it in the engine, it doesn't behave the same. It's not the same exact architecture as when you've got an actual client and server running over Steam. So the same bugs don't manifest in the same way, and the engine often treats things like local save files. It's the same for the client and the server, so you can't test things like customization. So in order to fix multiplayer issues, I literally have to tweak something, package the game, upload it to Steam, update our internal branch, update both my laptop and my PC, get them connected, test it for all of about 5 seconds, then make another tweak, and then package the game again. So between each tweak, it's like 15 minutes of flapping about. So as you can imagine, it takes a long time to test and resolve multiplayer problems because you have to go through the whole rigmarole of packaging and uploading to Steam between each tweak. So yeah, I hate multiplayer bugs. They're a nightmare. I love bugs that happen in the engine so I can fix it in the engine without having to mess about. And yeah. Grr. Yeah, I saw that one, AJ. Yeah, that's just a case of changing a 2 to a 1. Again, really easy to fix. Yeah, I don't think we need a railing around the outside. I mean, we'll see what the interior environment actually looks like once this is in there, but yeah, I think we'll be okay with that. So we just need, yeah, our central consoles for these. So let's just have a look. That sounds good. Yeah, the way you do it in Unreal is it handles that for you. So you can actually spawn as many clients as you want, but like I said, it's not an exact like representation of what a real multiplayer environment is like. So you don't experience exactly the same issues. Just kind of winging it a minute, just throwing some shapes around. Yes, Anasi. So the selection range is essentially as big as the bridge. So you could be standing over here and still select things on the holo display. Because you need to be able to select NPCs. And we might adjust that a little bit. In fact, hang on, let's go to our test map, because this is kind of pertinent to what we're doing. So for anyone that hasn't seen it before, this is my test map for the Magellan, which loads quickly because there's nothing on it other than the bridge and loads of junk that I'm messing about with. But yeah, when you highlight stuff, like the highlight range is about there. So we've tweaked that so that if you're sat here in the captain's chair, you need to be able to look over and actually highlight the helm chair so that you can perform actions on it. Now, oops, I just walked down to a planet and didn't want to do that. Holding down E and moving the mouse around does the same thing, so it's firing a line trace under the mouse cursor. And I need to stop walking through that portal. Do it on this side instead. I can't remember if I set a range on that or not. I don't think I did. No. So yeah, so the range when you're holding on E is significantly further. But if we have something on the holo display like so, then you don't need to be like stood in front of it in order to be able to highlight things. Obviously you do need to be stood in front of it to read it. But the idea with the Caravella is that you get up out of your chair, you're walking around, and you're using it as a tactical tool, which ultimately is also the point on the Magellan as well. and to that end, I'm going to probably halve this step to give us more walking room around here, and we'll probably steepen that slightly as well, because this needs remodeling to fit the screen on, because as you can see the screen doesn't fit. So we'll make this a bit steeper, bring that in slightly so that we have more room to walk around the outside, because there's a lot of trip hazard around here, and it takes away from the usability of the holo display, because you don't want to be like up and down steps the whole time. But yeah, but same principle. You don't need to stand in it to highlight things. You can just do it from over here. But we're going to split some of that up so that we have the left click looking at things interaction mode, which is going to start having some default actions assigned to it, and then the holding E to click on stuff, which will always bring up a context menu. Yeah, so I'm going to improve the way that works, AJ, by having it come up on... Ugh, the camera's going too fast. So when you select something on the holo display, we're going to have a holo menu that's floating here, and it will have all the details on there instead. So the idea is you kind of walk around, tap the thing you want, and that updates its own little menu. So you've got a selected target with all the information, and it will actually give you some proper information about that target as well as things you can do. So you'll have the command options in addition to some basic information. So we really want the holo display to be a really slick, usable experience. Exactly that. I mean, the user experience for the holo display needs to be really well polished, because that's the main way of interacting with the ship and controlling the ship when you're in command. So if you're not sitting at any of these consoles, you need to have a really robust way of getting a tactical overview, making tactical decisions, and having that information filter down to the various bridge stations without a lot of hassle and clicking about. But yeah, we'll continue to refine that to make it nice and smooth. But same deal here as well. So yeah, when you click something on the display, we can have all the information for that come up here on the UI, which means, because this is a smaller display as well, which will make it a bit easier, you can just stand here, holding E to click on things in the 3D space, and as you're clicking on them, it's updating this UI with all the information. And we'll be storing that as a command target as well. So the floating command target is going to be held in the back-end system, so that you can select something on the holo display, turn to an NPC, and then you can say, like, navigate to my target, or shoot my target, or scan my target. So that information is held in the game, so that the NPC or the player knows what it is you're talking about. So they'll have a use command target button on their UI that they can press to get that. In the same way that the helm has use sensor target, they'll also have a use command target as well, just so that we can pass that information around without you having to physically read out the coordinates to people. And again, talking about multilingual bridge crews like we were on the last stream, if the person sat at the sensors and a person sat at the helm don't speak the same language as you or each other, then simply by using the menu structure and sending things to them, we can localize that. So what they see on their side is the localized version of what you're inputting, which means you can have an entire conversation through menu interactions in a multilingual environment, so you don't actually need to speak the same language, which should hopefully help. There will be a hologrammatic version of the screen on the Magellan, because what we want to do is decouple things like zooming and rotating away from the console itself. So the idea is that the command interface for the holo display is for the command staff only. So if they want to zoom in and out on something, they are free to do so without the person sat at the sensors console messing up what they're doing when they're working on the sensors. So when the sensors are refining their view, it's not going to affect what the captain's seeing on the holo display. If they change modes, that will change. Maybe, actually. Maybe not, because in that vein, there's no reason why the sensors console can't be looking at the long range, whilst the captain is looking at, say, the medium range on the holo display. Because all they're doing is they're selecting the sensors as their mirrored device, so they're mirroring the sensors to the holo display, but they have their own way of controlling it. But yeah, we'll see how that interaction works, because we don't want to make it so the captain has to do everything. We want some of those actions to also be controllable via the sensors console. Because if you're sat in the command chair, you want to be able to say, show me the long range sensors, and you want the sensors guy to bring that up on the holo display for you without you having to physically get up and walk over and press the button yourself, because you're the captain. Why are you getting up and doing it? You've got people for that. So we'll probably have a send to holo button, or update holo display, something like that. We'll have some button or other on the sensors where once there is a command console on the holo display, we'll need to give the sensors a manual way of passing information to it, so that we don't have a conflict between the command staff and someone sat in the seat if they're both looking at the same thing, because that's just going to cause a fight on the bridge. We don't want that. Just realised that this isn't, because we've rotated this 80 degrees, it's not exactly aligned with the middle here. So what I will do instead is I will rotate this. And then I know that's in the middle. In fact, if we group that up, then it will keep the world origin, which means if I click it, you can see that it's now aligned that way. The Caravella needs a lot before it could be considered flyable. I would say not least of which, it needs an autopilot that can handle sublight engines. So unlike the Magellan, the Caravella is using like proper sublight thrusters. So that's going to need an entirely new autopilot that's capable of using that. So rather than just arbitrarily rotating the ship, it needs to know, right, I need to fire these thrusters to make the ship turn that way. And then when you're approaching your target orientation, then need to think, right, okay, I need to stop firing the thrusters now, and then start firing the thrusters in the opposite direction to slow down in time to face my target. So there's going to be a lot of code there sorting that out. Component this one up. So, like the Magellan, what we can do is we can rotate the flat portion of the screen, which is why the Magellan consoles look the way they do. The reason they are not a smooth curve, again, it's because these UIs can't curve along a complex angle. I don't have examples on this one, but like the UI that's on this glass is able to curve because it's vertical. And in a similar vein, the UI that's on this panel here is able to curve because it's vertical. When you have a non-vertical curve, you end up with something like this, where you've now got a complex curve, and the UIs can't do that. In fact, they can only curve inward as well, as far as I remember. I don't think they can curve outward. So we're forced to do something like this, where we have this angled console in order to keep them flat, and we'll have to do the same on the Caravella as well. So if we're having consoles that are arranged in a circle, then yeah, that needs to angle over. We could still have a curved cabinet that they're in, and then just have the screens flat, but I don't know. We'll see how that looks. I don't want to block their view too much of what's going on. So if we go back to Delta's concept here, like the helm has quite a lot of cabinet up in front of them. We don't want to block the helm's view looking forwards, so we'll have that, well, just the angled bit. We won't have anything up here. And similarly here, we don't want this to be too tall because we want them to also be able to see the holo display. Not that it's their display so much, like they don't own the holo display, that's for the command staff, but I think there's tactical usefulness in them being able to at least see it. Which means, like, on that note, I don't think these railings are needed. If we take that down a little bit. So the panel that we're currently using for the autopilots was always meant to be like an orbital maneuvers panel. So it's going to have things like align prograde, align retrograde, is it nadir, zenith, and all those things. So we will have all the various orbital angles and maneuvers that we're used to seeing in games like Kerbal, so that you've got that ability at the helm to do those things, and that will be and also actually, so like heading hold and like velocity hold, and we're going to make the autopilot work more like it does in a plane. So rather than just pressing one button and have it fly to its target, you'll have separate buttons for different parts of the autopilot. So heading hold will be separate from maintain velocity. There'll be two separate buttons. So if you want the autopilot to fly all the way to a target, you'd have to enable all of its options in order to navigate the ship entirely. I don't know whether we'll have pre-configured maneuvers. Maybe we could script something like that, so it would not be out of the question to have a really basic script where you can fire certain thrusters for certain intervals at certain power. So the script, which we could literally build into the UI on the helm, and easily save that as part of the save game, where you could build up a library of different maneuvers where you could program the ship like you would a simple robot. Like, I remember at primary school we used to have these turtle things that you'd be like, right, move forward 3 squares, turn right 90 degrees, move forward another square, turn left 90 degrees, and it would then like follow the thing that you set up. And we could do something like that where you simply say, right, so fire the aft thrusters for 10 seconds, and then fire like the left thruster for 3 seconds at certain power, so that you're just pre-programming a certain maneuver in the ship. But it would be a dumb maneuver. It wouldn't have any context awareness. It would just do exactly as it's told, firing the thrusters exactly as you told it to. So we could do something like that. That would be quite easy. But yeah, it wouldn't be any more intelligent than that. But you could, if you worked on the timing and kind of tweaked the script, you could do things like have it do a perfect 180 flip and stop exactly facing the opposite direction. So you could do things like that, or like have it do like a flip and barrel roll, because if the timing is exact every single time you run the script, then the ship should perform the same every single time. So if you were doing like combat maneuvers, say someone's following you and you've got someone at your 6 o'clock, what you could do is you could have the ship like thrust upwards, do a flip, suddenly do a retrograde burn, and then flip back again, and have that entire maneuver automated, so now you're behind your target. So yeah, you could do something like that perhaps. That could be an interesting one to play with. Yes, Dave. So having the ship arrive next to the planet rather than in front of it, yeah, that is part of the plan at some point. I need to work out, like, from your approach direction, like, where is 90 degrees relevant to your approach angle. I just need to work out the math for that, because then we can give the ship an exit location for the FTL that is, like, whatever multiplier on the radius is, i.e. the altitude, in a 90-degree offset from your approach angle, and then you would arrive exactly next to the planet on your port side. I think that's entirely doable. We just need to get the math right for it. Yeah, you need the left a bit button. Yep, the demo has life. Need to look for them tech signatures. And they show up on the long range. If you look at, I guess, F and G class stars as a priority, and you just basically just do a long-range survey on all the F and G class stars that you can find. You should stumble across a tech signature fairly quickly. Yeah, so the idea, I guess the way I envisioned like the actual ship working in the real world is that you would arrive within a sector of space and you would then sit there for a period of time doing long-range surveys of a selection of stars around you, maybe 15-20 star systems. You just do a long-range survey of each one, and then you have a look at, right, did anything interesting crop up in this batch of surveys? You might have terrestrial worlds in a habitable zone. You might have come across some tech signatures. You know, there will be things which would have cropped up on that batch of surveys. Then you fly over to them and you do your media range survey to see whether or not that was in fact an Earth-like in the habitable zone, or it could just be something else. Obviously, with the tech signatures, that means there is something there that is technology. It doesn't necessarily have to be an alien race. It could just be an old derelict station that's sending some transponder signal or other. But we want to make sure that it's never too predictable, like you don't know what you're going to find. Yes, there will be pew pew. What we tend to say about that is that in terms of the game and, you know, the mission that the ship is on, then getting into combat is essentially a diplomatic failure. So diplomacy has failed, and now you're finding yourself, you know, in a combat situation. So it's not the point of the game. It's not the aim of the game, but it is a consequence of messing up in some way. Our second DLC is going to be combat focused, so that will actually focus around combat. Yes, the comm station will be how you ultimately manage your relationship with alien races that you stumble across on your journey. Quite like the idea, actually, if we were to angle them in more. In fact, to be honest, I think we have to angle them in more for them to be properly viewable. We can align that angle with the edge of the step here and have that step continue around. Could look quite nice. Every multi-crew vessel will have guns. Shuttles won't have guns. At least most shuttles won't have guns. The shuttles are very much non-combat transport vehicles, so they won't have any firepower on them. The ships themselves will have firepower. Actually, I quite like the idea of angling that out as well. Like on the Magellan's Bridge, we've got this almost cog-like design here, and I'm thinking I might mirror that on the Caravella and make this more of a cog-like design rather than coming out straight or angled that way. Yes, Jamo. So each manufacturer within the game will have its own UI. So Lunara will have its own proprietary UI. The UN will have what we currently have on the Magellan. So that's kind of the really basic kind of mobile phone-esque UI that the UN use, whereas Lunara will probably have something slightly more fancy, slightly more extravagant. Hey Delta, you actually missed the fact that we've been referencing this. Exactly, Jamo, yes. So the back-end system for something like weapons or sensors, all the back-end code will be exactly the same. In fact, it will be the same code. So it's modular, so we'll literally be using the same code. It's only the front end that will be different. Conceptually, how you use it will be the same as well. Yeah, we won't have any kind of time skip or anything like that in the game. I guess the idea isn't just flying in a straight line and just keep flying. The idea is to go from star system to star system, seeing what's there, interacting with whoever might be there, and getting into adventures along the way. Obviously, right now the galaxy is very empty. We haven't started spawning any content yet. But yeah, it's not a case of just flying through the galaxy. And there's plenty to see along the way. So again, the idea is you start off by doing a local survey of the local stars around you, and then you use that information to pick somewhere to fly to based on, have you seen something that looks interesting? Predominantly that's going to be things like tech signatures. So if you just fly and keep flying, you're going to be missing out on all the stuff that you could be experiencing along the way. So I guess the way I'll be playing it is I will probably, because I'm terrible for being a completionist, so like I wouldn't be able to move on to like the next sector of space until I've like fully exhausted like the sector that I'm in. And I'll have to make sure that I found all the tech signatures and I found all the aliens that live in that sector, and I won't move on to the next sector until I've like discovered everything in the sector I'm in, and I have to get like every achievement as well. That's just kind of how I roll. But yeah, that's kind of what we have in mind. Explore, find everything, and then move on to another sector of space, and keep exploring. And with the I guess the difficulty level kind of ebbing and flowing as you move around the galaxy, there are going to be some areas in the galaxy that are too high level for you in your current state, so you'll need to be upgrading things and kind of making your ship more powerful and making your systems better before you're able to stand toe to toe with the species that are in that particular area of space. So you'll find that the galaxy will push back once we start implementing those things. Yeah, so when it comes to the sectors, they are there. They're just not listed as such. I mean, like, they are listed. If you go on the GPS, then you can see each sector of space on the GPS, and it shows you what's in that sector at a high level. So each sector of space is generated in isolation and is viewable as such on the sensors right now. But what we're not doing is we're not indicating that on the holo display, like on the long range sensors, which is something I want to improve upon, so that when you are on the long range sensors, you can actually see yourself crossing sector boundaries. So as you're flying through the galaxy, you can actually see the cubes moving by. And then we also need actual labeling on those cubes on the holo display, so it actually says like sector and then the sector address, so you can see yourself moving through the sectors and actually see the name of the sectors as you move, just to give you that kind of better visual indication of where you are in the galaxy. And we also want to make sure that when you have scanned something, then it comes up differently on the holo display, like with a different color or some other thing, so that we can, I guess, have data overlays. So I think Elite do something similar actually, don't they? So on the Elite star map, you can select like different information overlays. So we'll do something similar whereby you can select like which ones have you scanned, and then all the ones you've scanned will be like a color, and everything you haven't scanned will just come up like white or grey or something. And if you found life, then you'll be able to actually see on the holo display which of those star systems you found life in. So it will have different data overlays so that you can help organize your exploration activities and see just how much work you've done within a single sector. I'll certainly need that moving forward. There is already a bar. It's here. This is the alcohol room, as you put it, at the front here. Yes, the illusion, there will be space whales. Or at least to begin with, space coral. So we've got a plugin I've showed before where we can generate 3D fractals, and those 3D fractals look like coral life. And the nice thing about it is, with them being fractals, you can just throw numbers at them and they're completely different. So we'll have procedural 3D fractal creatures that will probably live in planetary rings and that sort of thing. I like the idea, and this was a debate that me and Claire were having about the viability of life in a planetary ring. And my argument was, as long as it has an energy source and something to metabolize, then life should be possible. So you've got energy source from whatever star is there, you've got the minerals or whatever is in the planetary ring to metabolize, so technically you've got the components needed for some kind of life. Even if it's something like a coral or a plant or an algae, there's something there. You've got those things. I think that the lack of a solvent was one of the things that came up, but I'm sure we can maybe hand wave it to some extent. But I think it's plausible. I think we can plausibly have life in planetary rings as long as we've got an energy source, something to metabolize, and some kind of solvent. Then you can have life. At least to my very simple understanding of what life is. Not in the same way, Delta, no, sadly. I find it hilarious that you know that so exactly, Frustus. Just going to get this fleshed out a little bit, and then I'm going to export it into the engine, and then we can see what we're doing. Yeah, I think I'll definitely angle those that way. I think that would look nicer. And we'll see what the holo display looks like in this space. So we need to take that. Oh. Group all that together. That, and that. So we want Caravella test. Bridge consoles. Right, and then we need to remove that little thing from the middle there. Just re-export that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's deck 1, segment 4. Do you want me to add beer to the 3D printer first? That's a point actually. In the so we've got the drinks 3D printer in the quarters. You raise a good point in that it probably needs to fit a wine bottle in the cubby that does the 3D printing. It needs to be tall enough to be able to print bottles out. So I'll make sure we adjust that. Oh, that's weird. They should do. Oh, I wonder if I broke that. So again, going through and changing all the gating on the loading screen and how all that works has caused issues with things not loading. So things like it not loading your save data when starting it or continuing a game. Not remembering where you left your props will be part of that. So I will make sure I go through and fix it. Oh, I forgot I moved it. Hang on. So for the purposes of exporting this for now, I'm going to have to move that back. Obviously we've updated this, so it all needs to be moved. I suppose I better do the floor as well while we're at it. And then actually, if we go to the same folder, then we can import our test mesh. Ah, not a bad guess. Okay, so something we're going to have to do with this holo display is give it scale controls and remove these little projectors from the base actor so that we can have them, we can basically make a generic holo display that we can use elsewhere. But I'm just wondering for now whether or not we just duplicate this one so that we're not breaking the Magellan's one. Then we'll replace that one with a temporary one, which we can now edit. Yeah, I don't want to mess with anything that this one's doing. Of course, so that's going to error because it's trying to reference a different class. I think what we'll do is we'll set that up with a blueprint interface rather than casting to it, because I shouldn't need to do that because we only need to store a reference to the actor anyway. Yeah, so sure I did actually add that one. Yeah, that was it. So set parent BP. So rather than casting to it, we'll just send a reference to this actor across to the screen. But it does mean that on the screen, we then need to make sure we actually implement that. So that's just so that we know what we're controlling when we press the buttons. So set parent BP. And all we need to do is take our holo controls. So rather than that being a direct reference to that, we're going to make that a generic actor reference instead. So again, we don't need to do any specific casting then. Yeah, maybe on future ships, Delta. The lore that we're currently going with is that the holo displays are big, bulky devices that haven't been miniaturized yet. They take a lot of power. They're not the sort of thing which would be used, say, in a residential environment. They're just big, bulky hardware. The same thing with like internal force fields for things like the shuttle bay doors. So the hardware to create the force field in the shuttle bay door is bulky, it's power hungry. It's not something you could put in a corridor to have like a force field in the corridor. It's just not that good. So as we progress with the game and the timeline in the game, then things like holo displays can start to be miniaturized, and then the capabilities of the hardware can be improved. We won't ever be to the point where we could like create a holodeck, because our holograms won't be physical in the same way that they are on holodecks. Like, you couldn't make a hologram sandwich and then eat it like you can on a Star Trek holodeck. Then they're not tangible things, they're made of light. But we could probably have something like a holodeck style environment where it at least looks like you're there, like VR almost, so that you can go into a room, project a landscape or some scenery, which looks really pretty, but you can't touch anything because it's just light. I guess the holo display can be any size. It's more about the hardware that's required to generate it. Obviously the emitters are tiny, but you've got these tiny little emitter things up here, but in the Magellan ceiling there's a lot of like capacitors and hardware that is part of the hardware that drives that. So they're very power hungry. Ultimately you're exciting light particles. It's a power hungry job. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, so scalability wise, we can separate scaling of objects versus things like text. So we can apply a world scale to text. So if you're making the holo display smaller and smaller and smaller, the text won't get any smaller, it will stay the same size. So we can do something like that. Okay, so we just need to update these as well to button press. So part of the point of separating these is that you also need to use blueprint interfaces across the board rather than casting and just triggering a specific event on the parent blueprint. So we're no longer doing that. And the whole point of doing this is breaking up reference chains. I was reading earlier today actually that there is still some overhead when you're using blueprint interfaces as opposed to true global events, but it's still better than casting. Okay, so that just sends through those button presses. Oh yeah, I've just put this in the wrong one. I needed the message version of this, which is why that failed. Whoa, no, we don't want that. Let's try that again. That's more like it. Right, so the target obviously is our parent blueprint, and then we would use this when sending it to player controller, so player controller knows where it came from in order to send it back as a replicated button press. Right, so that should clear up those errors. And then one final thing we need to do is where we manage our button presses on here. None of that's needed, that can all go. Yeah, so we're, instead of using this, instead, and that needs to be client as well, so we want to call that event there. And rather than using the server version of this, we're sending, sending the client version. So, that one, and that goes there. So that's come from the UI. We're now sending it to player controller using the client message, and then it comes back from the player controller as server message. So I actually know to do it from here, don't I? So giving it this reference to self is how it knows where to come back to, and that just comes back. So what we're doing is we're passing our button ID as a client action, and it comes back as a server action, which means that it is replicated. Because we're setting, we're doing set with notify, so we're using a rep notify variable, which fires on all the clients. And we can't do that unless it's server authoritative. Okay, So that solves that problem. And none of that involved casting anywhere. But then what we want to do, of course, is we want to, I guess, move these, although that's one static mesh, isn't it? Yeah, so that mesh can go. And then we'll take our emitter lights. Well, actually, let's move them down. Let's move all of them down. Guess we're not going to need quite as many of these because they're it's a much smaller display. We'll just have them go up the other way. So each one of these needs to go that way. Well, I suppose actually before I do that, let's delete every other one. And I'm not having to do as many. Even that might be too many, to be honest, but we shall see. We just need to move those in, which I shall. It'd be helpful if I had that actually. In fact, what I might do is if we no, I won't do that because it's going to be offset in the wrong place. Let's just get rid of that a minute so I don't edit the wrong one. How many have we got? Yeah, so I can do this more easily. Yeah, that should be possible, Dave. Yeah, we haven't really delved a lot into the capabilities of the AR goggles and how they're going to work. Obviously, when you pick something up, some kind of a tool or other object, then the AR goggles will be able to connect to it and display settings and configurations and that sort of thing, like ammo counts for a weapon and those sorts of stuffs. But yeah, when it comes to using the AR for other things, we haven't really delved into it a huge amount. I made that 150, didn't I? So that one would be minus 150, 150. Which is going to create a square. Let's get them all in first. Then minus 150, minus 150. So if we were to do this, 5 would be 150 minus 150. 6 would be 150, 0. 7 would be 150, 150. 8 would be 150. No, 0 minus 150. Then 9 would be 0 minus 150. We'll forget about 4 for a minute. Okay, that should be all of them pointing inward. In what is approximately a circle. Yeah, pretty much. What if we just increase that angle a little bit, or reduce it? No, 50, 55, yeah, about that. Yeah, just so it's just within the railing. And I think no, that's about right actually. So that would just project our visible beams up onto the holo display. Yeah, potentially Delta we could do. Yeah, the captain's quarters not far from here. Yeah, we'll see how we do the layout in that room, because there might not even be room for it. Right, let's just see whether anything actually illuminates with that. Oh, that needs moving. Okay, so we've definitely got room to maneuver around the outside, so that's good. So we don't actually need to bring this in anymore. Plenty of room there. Which means that, again, if we're extending this forward by what is essentially 12 meters, because that's how wide this room is. So we've got this 12 meter space here between the bridge and the stairwell. So we can have a central corridor running down the middle. I suppose not unlike this one. In fact, exactly like this one. So this corridor here would be between the stairwell and the bridge. So the bridge would be here, and then the stairwell would be there where it is. And then either side of that, you've got 2 rooms. So more than enough room here for a giant conference room. A head. In fact, you could have a head and a conference room in this space. It's more than big enough. And also you could have offices there as well. So the captain can actually have room for an office if need be, which could be useful. Especially, I suppose, given that this is a corporation vessel, the captain is going to be an employee of that corporation. The corporation is probably going to want a lot of reports and a lot of paperwork. So I think having an office would be kind of essential. And that would basically go here. We should still have visibility of the engines and such. Probably have better visibility actually, because we're a bit further forward. Just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of being able to see the engines out the window. Not to mention potatoes. Okay, I've never heard of that. I shall look it up. Yeah, I like the idea of putting the corporate logo in the middle of the bridge. I think that's exactly where they'd want it. Okay. Okay, so that console definitely needs to be higher. These ones are almost the right height already. Obviously we'll tweak that, but we get rid of that dude a minute, sit there. Control the jumpy chairs. For some reason it's accepting my helm input from this chair. Weird. Yeah, so that needs to be taller, certainly. Who knows? Right, let's see if we can get something on that holo display. I can't remember what that's from, but I think I know what you mean, yeah. I have a feeling that's gonna still bounce unless I put the actual capsule mesh above it. Yes, Firstus. So those little drone camera things, they exist so people can record videos and do machinima and that sort of thing. Is that how you pronounce it? Is it machinima? I never know how to pronounce that word. Good, good. So move these up a little bit, rotate them round a bit. Something like that. We know that that was an 80-degree rotation around there, so that made that easy to angle. I suppose somewhat like that. It's funny, I've been watching Mock the Week, scenes we'd like to see, kind of on loop. I love those. That is interesting actually. Why does the sensors chair have helm input? That's weird. I fixed these sub menus again earlier because I realized that they weren't working, so we now have the ability to control the NPC again properly. Right, there we go. We're not hopping up and down now. Okay, that feels about right height-wise. So to make sure that we're getting the holo display to see this. I do wonder whether it's just an electrical problem. Yes, it's probably exactly what it is. So actually we can use this cable here. Actually, no, we can't because it doesn't have. Yeah, I haven't made physical connectivity for that yet, so we'll borrow this one. Yeah, so the idea, like the finished version of the panels, should basically look like the 4 bolts that hold the panel on. You'll have some kind of tool just going to go zzz, 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 like that to undo the 4 bolts. And they'll just stay sticking out of the panel. They won't like come out or anything. At that point, the panel will be removable. So we'll probably have it highlight yellow until you've undone the 4 bolts, and then it will highlight green to show that you can remove it. When you remove the panel, it will turn into a crate. So you'll just have like a sci-fi-ish looking crate that just says like wall panel kit or something on it. And then you'll be able to pick that up and carry it around. When you then go to put the wall panel back on again, you would use the wall panel kit on the space that the panel goes, and it will come up and then need its bolts screwing back in. They're huge. I mean, the panels themselves, some of them are like 2.5 meters wide, which is kind of unrealistically large, but we'd have to change a lot about the internal design to make them any smaller. So yeah, they are quite big. So they're not the kind of thing you can just pick up and carry around. So having them collapse into a magic box is probably the best we can do with it. No problem. The same will be true for floor panels as well. And the other benefit of making them a kit is that you can then use that in any position. So I guess using the Caravella as an example. So you've got like an end door frame panel, a mid door frame panel, and like a mid corridor panel. So these are 3 physically different panels, but all 3 of them will collapse into the same wall panel box. So then you can use that same wall panel box on all 3 of these spaces, and it will automatically become whichever one that is. So the box is kind of generic and you can use it anywhere. Otherwise you'd need to 3D print like that specific panel. And on the Magellan, for example, there are hundreds of them, literally hundreds of different panel styles all over the ship, because you've got different curves of corridor, you've got all the little corner pieces, you've got so many different shapes that it would be craziness to have all of that on a menu somewhere to 3D print exactly the right one. So having that just generic wall panel kit that goes in any slot kind of just makes life a little bit easier. It's kind of one of those quality of life things. Not sure what you mean, Anasi. Round corners on what? sure that this is actually getting the cable we want to get. No, which means it's probably not going through its startup, so begin play. So we're looking for levels loaded. We're not running as client, are we? No. Make sure we are actually getting that. Oh, did I not tick that? No, of course I didn't. That's weird. Why are we firing levels loaded twice? Skip that one for a start. So we're firing levels loaded. Yeah, so at that point, it should be looking for its cable. Let's make sure none of these other cables have debug on. I'm going to make that a different color just to make sure it's not coming from somewhere else, but then it is firing this one twice, so it does make sense. Or there's two of them. Do we have two of them? Because that would make sense. Do. Right, so that's what's going on. Bring that one back there. Exactly the illusion, yes, there was more than one of them. Simple as that. Okay, that's weird. Oh, I bet that's waiting for... Where are we? Wrong blueprint. You're waiting for this one. That'll be on the old reactor, I expect. So I'm still in the process of moving everything over to the gameplay message subsystem. So some things are still using the old plugin. Right. So the holo display has a valid cable. There's only one of them. That's working. So, there we go. So we can see something at least. Okay, so right. So now that we've got this far, I remember this happening on the last stream. It's because the material is using an offset that we don't have. So let's get rid of this debug a minute because that's no longer needed. I don't think I'm an AI. I mean, last I looked in the mirror, I felt real. What was I looking for? There we are. So each of our objects that we're rendering on the map are using a material which fades out based on radius. So the sphere mask is basically being driven by our world position, and then we're doing a radius around the center of the ridge, basically. So what we need to do is we need to drive the location on the material by using custom data on the mesh, basically. So I suppose we could use the mesh, the actor location, but we kind of want to be able to specify the exact center of the display for our needs. That's true, Delta. Yeah, that's very true. Best way to do this, because we could take, because if we're treating the center of the display as the center of our sphere, which I think we are, I don't think we're offsetting that, so that background thing, where is it? That, the background sphere, yeah, so that's at 0, 0, 0. Is this? Yes, it is. So, yeah, so they are both aligned to the center of of the display. So what I can do, and we're going to have to do this on everything that we spawn. So obviously sometimes we've got literally thousands of stars rendered on the display. So for each one of those that we render, we're going to have to add some custom mesh data. And I don't think they do. I don't think no, we are using. I think we are using it for the color when we do the stars. So hang on, if I go through our execution chain a minute. So where are we? Render stars there. So basically we have this messy macro, and we are setting custom primitive data on the mesh with our color for each star. So we're going through our process of selecting colors, and then we're going through and applying that. So we're already using 0, 1, 2 and 3 being brightness. So we'd have to set it as 4 for our origin. So we'd have to make this custom mesh data. So we're taking the absolute world position of the pixel, and then we're measuring it to the center of the bridge at a height of 247.5 centimeters, which is like the middle of the display. So we need to replace this with parameter. So we call that display origin. Then we need to give that, make that custom primitive data with a primitive data index of 4. So we're already using 0, 1, 2 and 3 for the color of objects. So if we use data index 4 for our display origin, then that uses 4, 5, 6 and 7. We only need to worry about 4, 5 and 6 for the X, Y and Z. So that will be basically a 300 centimeter radius around that point. But we're also going to have to do the radius actually, aren't we? So if we plug 7, so you've got 4, 5 and 6 for red, green and blue, and then the alpha is 7. So we can make the alpha our radius, just to package that all in one 4 vector. So basically, that's now set to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 with a radius of 1. So we need to, and I guess we're using this on everything. Just need to make sure that any version of this, including like the galaxy map, is using the same thing. Why does Claire look different? Claire, you have a thing, a shield. Have YouTube updated their mod display? So what we need to do then is we need to, when setting our data, so if we I want to set custom date, custom date, vector 4. Okay, so let's drag this over here a minute out the way. Make our messy macro even messier. So here's where we need to give the material the data that it needs. So this is going to be the radius of the display. So we can configure this in here even. So display radius, and we'll use this ultimately for driving everything about how we're rendering the display and scaling it as well. So things like the dark background sphere that it generates, we need to make sure we scale that relative to this display radius. If we set it to 300 by default, then that matches the one on the Magellan. And then we just need to get actor location. So that's our that's the location of the actor as a whole, which we know where that is. So we'll drive that directly. So what we're basically saying is take the location of this actor, pipe that into the XYZ. The data index would start at 4. So that would be 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we'll also, in our construction script, we shall take that, and we shall take our background sphere. I want to change the galaxy and everything as well. Where is it? There it is. So just checking the actual size of this, right? So it's exactly 100 centimeters wide, so that's perfect. It is a meter sphere, which means it has a radius of 50. So we just need to do the math to make it 300. And what are we? No, so we're scaling at 4.1. So we set relative scale 3D. Obviously all of these will be the same value. So if 100 would be a scale of 1, then 200 would be a scale of 2, 300 would be a scale of 4, which would be that divided by divided by 50 now. There's going to be a mathy way of doing this, and I need to get my head around it. Hang on, where's the calculator? A minute. This is where I have these like blind spots trying to work the math out. I'll see you, Danger Mouse. Have a good one. And thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, good luck with that migraine. Right, so 300 divided by 50 is what, 6? No, that's not what I typed. Yeah, so if we want to get a consistent scaling, then we would want 50 divided by 300. No, that wouldn't work either. So what we need to do here, math-wise, I enjoy math, but I also hate it at the same time. So we've got a display radius in centimeters, and we know that the radius of our sphere is 50. A 1 meter sphere, radius of 50. So we need to scale that sphere by a scalar based on the display radius. So to make the sphere 300 centimeters in radius, we need to scale 50 4 times, because it's 4 times bigger. So 1 times bigger would be 50, 2 times bigger would be 100, 3 times bigger would be 200, and then 4 times bigger would be 300, I think. Hang on, 50 times 4, no, that's 200, isn't it? So how do I... Oh, unless the scaling that I'm doing is bigger than I thought. Because I'm scaling it by 4.1, so... Oh, that makes sense, actually, doesn't it? So 450s are 200, which would mean the sphere itself is 4 meters wide, which matches the width of the display on the bridge. So why were we using 300 as our fade? Because that was set to 300 by default. Hang on. I think I'm missing something there. So if we wanted it to be a radius of 200, so that would be divided by 50, it's 4, yeah. So that would be 4 times bigger. That makes sense. So that is actually right. So that should be what we're looking for. So yeah, because 50 divided by 50 is 1. 50 divided by 100 is 2. So, yeah, that works. Yeah. So for some reason I was overcomplicating that, and I got confused by the fact that it said 300 on there. But let's see what that actually comes out like. If we make that visible by default, because I believe it is hidden by default. Let's make that visible and make that instance editable. Yeah, quite possibly. Right, so yeah, so right now it's big. So if we change our display radius, what we're doing is we're actually changing the size of that sphere. So 50 would be our 1 meter sphere, 100 gives us that, 200 gives us that, so 150, oops, no, 150 was the exact radius we drew of here. So we know that this base is 150, and that is in line with that. So that's essentially what we want. We want our hollow display to be in line the base, and obviously the projectors are a little bit occluded, but that's fine. We'll ignore that. It does mean we definitely need a bit of a bump on the bridge ceiling, or like a domed window or something to fit that in. But we're all like floor wise. So to be honest, that can probably come down a bit. Yeah, it can. So if we bring that down slightly to there, just so we're making sure that it absolutely fits in to the space we're providing. And we can also make that concaved as well, so it can slide down into there even more. So we don't actually need much of a dome on top. We can make that fit. Yeah, or I just need to spend more than 5 seconds thinking about it. But that does give us the ability to now arbitrarily scale the radius of our holo display, and then we should actually, if we also set the galaxy map the same, so if we make that visible and the background visible as well, make sure it's not on the floor or something. So I imagine they are using a similar but different material. Yeah, same thing. So we'll do the same with this one. So if we grab that and replace that, so we've got our speed and our radius. And then we just need to make sure that on our construction script we take our galaxy. I want to set custom data that one, the default one. And the same thing, in fact we want to do this for galaxy background as well. So we're going to take our display radius and put that into our alpha channel, and then we're going to get actor location for our world coordinates, and we're going to split that for our X, Y, and Z. Hang on, I think that was the wrong one. Set custom, set default primitive. Ah, that's what I wanted. Not the other one, it was this one I wanted. Because we need our data index, not a string. Okay, so data index 4. If anyone's doing this, by the way, it's important to use the default one, not just set custom primitive data. Otherwise, it won't set the actual live value, which has caused me issues in the past. I think I can see, yeah, a galaxy there. So does that therefore mean that it's making, oh yeah, so, right, okay. So you can see as I make the display bigger and smaller, you can see it's culling the material because we're setting that radius value. So right now we're drawing a sphere, so of course it's culling it in a sphere. Which I suppose is correct. I think we could turn it into a cylinder instead, but when it comes to the stars and things, we definitely do want to do it in a sphere, which means that we need to raise the galaxy map up so that it fits into this space. Which will affect the orientation of the ship as well, actually, because we use an offset from the location of the GPS thing. So moving this might work. We'll find out when we actually render the ship onto it. Oddly, that fits on there, weirdly. Right, so we were to set that at 0 and set that at -10 to give us our shadow underneath, then that should fit within the sphere. Just need to make sure that we account for the offset when showing the position of the ship. And that's too high up, but still. Let's just grab that tab so we can see what we're doing. So the galaxy itself, so move that down to about, I guess, level with the railing. So that's, let's call it -58, and then the background would be -68. That's just like the shadow that goes under it. Obviously, we wouldn't have the sphere there when viewing the galaxy map, and then we'd have to scale that accordingly as well. Yeah, so actually on that note, when we do our math for drawing the stars and drawing the orrery map and all those things, we need to make sure we take the actual radius of the display into account, so that we're properly scaling those displays by the display radius. So let's just see whether or not we have that. So we should see the galaxy map now, although I don't think the ship will be in the right place on it, or at all, because it's probably hidden. Okay, so it's putting it down there. So it will be, yeah, so it's doing that in the code, but it's there. So if I change our scale, yeah, it's doing it all the way down there, which we don't want. We want it all the way at the top. Okay, so where's it gone? We find a reference to that. So we're driving it with this. Ah, there we go. that's our offset. So let's make a note of that so we don't forget. Right, and then we should be using that same offset for everything else that we do as well. So yeah, so the ship location is also driven by that, so that's fine. So we need our ship indicator, and we also need to make sure that we apply the same culling process on this one as well. So again, we take our display origin, pop that in there. So everywhere we care about the radius of the display, etc., we will pop that in there. And then of course we also need to make sure that we set that on the construction script, so we should be able to just pop that in there, because they're all static messages, so they can all go the same way. The like the tracer lines for targets and things, they'll need to have the same culling setup as well. Okay, so we have the ship, and we have stars. Not that we can see them, because they're going to need the same, I expect. And we're rendering it big, because they're outside of the display, I think. Okay, so where did it put the map? Okay, so this scaling here, or we're scaling the background and the galaxy, is going to also have to it's going to have to take our display radius into account. So we're going to have to work out how big we want it to be on the display. So if our GPS range, and this is probably the easiest one to do it for, if we're saying the range is 100,000 light years, then or rather 50,000 light years, that should be the entire width of the Milky Way. So the radius of 50,000, that's the whole Milky Way galaxy. So we want to make sure that that fits into our display radius, so we need to divide that by this, which I won't do yet. Let's just make it visible first. So if we don't offset it, then it should render it right in the middle. Yeah, there. So why was it disappearing? Okay, so the ship's in the right place. Yeah, that's where Sol is. Which means if we do that, yeah. So we're in the right place, both horizontally and vertically. Okay, so why, oh why, did adding that mess it up? If we do just like -5, see if it nudges it down a little bit, or whether it just makes it vanish. I wonder whether that's going the opposite direction. Okay. Can't see which way it's going without actually hitting play each time. Thank you, Festus. So it's going up. I think it's going up, not down. Alright, so we need to do that the opposite direction then. Oh, of course. I'm a div. Look, I'm subtracting -20, so of course it's going up. Everyone loves a double negative. That's better. Right, so if we now increase the range, we should see the ship appear. So the ship is being culled. If I get that so we can see it better. So as we reduce the range of the display, you can see that the ship's being culled at the edge based on our display radius, which is what we want to see. So nothing can be rendered in 3D beyond the radius that we've set. Okay. So the next question is, why do we not have stars? Let's fix that one. So we know that we... Oh, actually, let's just try the orrery map, actually. I didn't look at that one. Thank you, Jamo. Yeah, I think once we lock in on something, we can get it put together quite quickly. I find a lot of the stuff that takes time is that initial kind of head scratching and planning and thinking, oh, shall I put it there or should I put it over there? Like once you actually work out what you're doing, then you can kind of lock in and get it done. So we're seeing objects, but we're not seeing objects. So they are there, but they're not there. I imagine similarly, so is that planet there, but not actually there. Need to make sure that everything on the display is actually using the correct stuff. And it just occurs to me that we're using the old Magellan. So our little ship indicator old mesh. So Magellan proxy. There we go. Make it that instead. Right, so let's sort out the orrery map a minute. Right, so all of those they're also going to need this. Again, I imagine there's probably a fair number of different materials that we're using on the holo display, all of which are going to need the same update to them. And then on the construction scripts, because again, all of these are static meshes, they can all just go straight onto there and receive exactly the same data. And I'm willing to bet that probably is also not using the right material. As I suspected. Bit. That has it too. Yes, of course it does. Which does mean actually I'll probably need to do that. Oh no, I don't. Hurrah! So basically anything that is being rendered on the display needs to have that cull distance set up on it. Including that and that. I suppose them as well. Starting to see some text now. Okay, interesting. So yeah, so we're definitely targeting stuff. Though it is weird that we're not on the... Oh, unless we're like... Oh, we are. Wasn't zoomed in enough. Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, actually on that note, so these colour bands are fading at the edge, like we need them to, which is good. We don't want them overflowing the edge of the display, which they do not. So I'm just trying to get an idea for how we are in terms of our room to maneuver as we go around, sort of doing our tactical analysis of things. And there's plenty of room. I need to put a better material on this so it's not the wireframe version. Right, so planet text is not showing, and planets themselves are not showing, and neither are the orbit lines. So that probably means that they're being generated dynamically. So we just need to make sure we slap that on them. So we grab that in a minute. So we want hollow mode, no, or render orrery map. That's what we wanted. So this is us rendering the orrery map. As you can see, it's chunky. So this here is where we do our scaling. So actually on that note, we can now plug that in there because we're now setting that as our editable value, essentially. But now that we've done that, we need to make sure that we do that in every instance where we are handling our radius, because otherwise the math will be off and things won't be in the right place. So just make sure we do that everywhere. that's that. It's going to be the same in a whole bunch of places. Yeah, so the Magellan's one was 4 meters wide, whereas this one is only 3 meters wide. So it's a smaller display. But by doing this, what we're doing is we're creating a display that we can use anywhere. I'm going to save that because it just lagged for a minute. Yeah, so we're making a generic display now that we can put on any ship in any location and scale it to any size we want, and it will just work. In fact, I'll try sticking it out the window in a minute, and we'll do like a giant version of it, just to prove the point that it works, or more accurately, to satisfy my personal curiosity. Kind of need to make just that into a little macro because we're using it so often all over the place that it's silly not to have it as a macro. This one. So where we're using a spline mesh to generate our orbit rings and such, we'll probably need to apply the same logic to those for the custom data. Is that all of it? Right, I probably missed a couple, but we'll find those as we go. So add planet ball. So we're going to add a static. Right, there we go. So yeah, so we're spawning a static mesh basically. So it's a new mesh as far as the game's concerned, which means we just need to do this. Need to messily insert it into the thing. That will get our planets visible. Same here, we're just adding a generic text render component. So again, we just need to set our custom primitive data. That's fine. So blah 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 blah. Right, so we're adding a spline mesh component, which again is going to require So, oh yeah, we had our various rings. And our text. Yeah, so kind of unavoidably, we need to add this step to all of them. Otherwise, they won't know where they're culling from. So we have to add it to both the spline mesh itself on all of these, and also the text render components as well, because again, otherwise it won't know where it is. Do these ones first. Fortunately, we only need to do this once. The alternative to doing it like this would be to use dynamic material instances, and the reason we're not doing that is because they have a draw call cost associated with them, and you would have to have different material instances for different purposes. Where if we're using custom mesh data, then you're literally just updating a field on the mesh itself, and you're not having to generate an additional draw call or anything like that, which is especially important when, like with the main long-range display, when you've got a couple of thousand little meshes, instanced meshes, then you can't set a different material on each one. So using custom mesh data means you can have literally thousands of different coloured balls using the same mesh and the same material. So that whole thing's like 2 draw calls rather than thousands. Funnily enough, I tried using billboards for the stars, but having that many billboards really lags. Oh, it'd help if I plugged them in, wouldn't it? Yeah, it certainly is. I think those ones are handled already. Let's give it a whirl and see. Okay, we have planets, that's a start. Okay, so what we're lacking then is we're lacking the text descriptions for the planets, and we're lacking the orbit lines for the orrery map. Okay. We've got that one now though, so we can see our local planet, and again you can see that it's actually culling the display now, using the center of this sphere, which can arbitrarily be anywhere. So if we zoom in and out, it should cull accordingly. Hoorah! Okay, so so that still works. So again, ever since I added these little pop-up displays on these things, I've hated them. Like, they're just ugly and pointless. So I think having the ability just to go, right, that one, and then just have that come up on a display here instead, is going to be, from a usability perspective, far more intuitive, because you're just saying, right, that planet, and then down here you'll say, right, send that to the helm or whatever, and it will just linger as the current target, and then when you select a different one, it will make it so you can only select one at a time rather than lots. Not yet, it's no moon yet. So if we take this and we copy that out here, the idea is if we set this one to, I don't know, 300, and then that one to 500, and then that one to 1000. So we've got 3 versions of the display in different scales. So the information on the displays shouldn't get bigger. It should remain world scaled. Maybe. Let's see how it actually looks. So if we bring that up, we've got, yeah, so the planet balls are the same size as we'd expect, which means if we zoom in the display, it's going to be a bit laggy because it's rendering multiple displays at once. Like that. And then we should have okay, yeah, so that needs a bit of adjustment, because you'll see that the size of the temperature regions is inconsistent. So like all of these ones are in the warm area, whereas these ones are kind of overlapping the habitable zone. So they need fixing. Something like that, yeah. Okay, yeah, so that is going to need tweakage. yes, for the balls themselves. So the balls and the text are staying consistently scaled. Because what we don't want is the text to get bigger and bigger and bigger as you scale the display bigger and bigger and bigger. What we actually want is, by scaling the display, we're giving more room to render that data. Although I suppose we could maybe have that as a toggle. So I'm just thinking forward with future ships and future uses of this system. We could maybe specify a world scale and like a render scale. So we have our physical sphere, which is the space in which we can render stuff, but then we also specify a world scale, and that's like an overall scaler where we can decide how big we want the text and stuff to be in terms of world scale. That would probably be the better way of doing it, because then we can have small, really, really small displays with smaller text than usual, because it's such a small display. But then we can also blow it up to be massive, but keep the text normal sized, so that we can display more information rather than making the display bigger, just scaling it up. Because we want to be able to change our display footprint, not the display scale, if that makes sense. I shall leave those out there for the testings. Right, let's just have a look at those ring renderings. So yeah, so these weren't rendering. Okay, so we're adding our spline mesh. Okay, then we're setting that on the spline mesh, so that should be enough, unless the material we're using is the wrong one. Could very well be the issue here. Ah, yeah, that's what it is. It's another material that doesn't support that. So I better check those text renders as well. So if that's that one, and I'm assuming these are all going to be using the same basic source material, and probably that one as well. So when we add our text render, this one should support it. Oh no, that doesn't either. Fine. That would explain why the text wasn't showing. Okay, we're almost there. So we still need our orbit lines, which I'm guessing is the same thing where the material doesn't have its right thing set up. Hang on, wrong display. Let's just zoom that in a bit. Okay, so our zones look like they're accurately positioned. They seem to fit the scale. Yeah, they seemed... Oh, I'm wondering... No, that can't be right. rotate that round so we can see it better, but I'm pretty sure that that is actually accurate, and the differences in these when we're looking at them is because of the angle that we're looking at them at. So I think they are actually right, because otherwise those rings would be in the wrong place. So that one's facing that way. So if I move that 45 degrees or so that way, and we'll rotate this one slightly the other way. A change I'm going to make with moving on to the medium range display, and when you go like when you align to target on the long range as well, is when you do that, you'll notice on the long range it scales it to the frost line, so we can actually see essentially the most interesting part of the star system. For the medium range, we're not doing that. We're automatically scaling it to the furthest object, which means you lose practically all of the detail right in the middle. So we'll do it that way. So yeah, actually, these are correct. It's the angle that I'm looking at them from that's that was causing the confusion. But you can see that the line that we're tracing to mark the edge of the area is aligned with the coloured balls, and it is aligned on all of them in the same place. So that is actually accurate, and the fact that it looks like the planets are in different places is because we're looking at it from different angles. But yeah, they are all correctly positioned. So the way that this is working now then is we are providing more render distance, although yeah, that one's scaling. It's doing a bit of both, to be honest, because we're scaling the display of the information with the scale of the display, but the actual elements are staying world size. So we've got kind of like a hybrid of the two at the moment. So we need to fix that so it's one or the other. So either we have a world scale or we have a display area. But yeah, they are working, so that's the main thing. Right, let's just get rid of these because they are lagging something crazy. Right, okay, so the last one then is we just need to make sure that the stars themselves are properly rendering, and I imagine, oh, and the orbit rings, yeah, stars and orbit rings. So that's data ring, planets. Okay, so we add static mesh for the planets, attach that, text component, ring. Okay, so add the spline mesh component, add the spline mesh. Right, so it must be this material. Yeah, it's not set up. I need to kind of unify this a bit into just a single material that we're using for general holo display usage, because a lot of this stuff can just be parameterized. We don't need to duplicate it every time. I mean, we've got some slightly different functionality on some of them, but yeah, I think for the most part we can probably merge all of this into one or a couple materials rather than having to have a whole bunch of them. Huzzah! Okay, we have lines. Okay, so we've got our orbit lines, we've got our text. It's all culling at the edge like we want it to. Okay, so I think that's the orrery map done. Same for that one, so that's working. They're all working on there. Okay. Short range is working, so it's and yeah, the galaxy map was working, so it's just the long range now. So yeah, so the data's there. We just need to make sure it appears. Yeah, so the astrometrics one is obviously going to be bigger, so it's like 2 decks tall and quite wide, so it'll have a much larger display area. So we'll use, now that we've done this work tonight on being able to have an arbitrarily scaled and positioned holo display, I'll update that with what I said, with having world scale for the data be separately configurable to footprint of display, so that we can make it bigger but then scale the data to the size that we think is fitting for the size of the room or the size of the display. So it's neither too big nor too small. But for the astrometry lab, I think for the most part there's going to be a lot of recall of data, so there'll be a lot of catalog data that you can pull up from previous scans. We'll probably have a separate sensor array for the astrometrics, so that you can actually just do that kind of work, like separately from the sensors on the bridge. So we'll probably have a separate physical array, so that you're not so you don't have both the bridge and the astrometry lab trying to use the same sensor array at the same time and causing a conflict. So we'll just have separate arrays for that. As for are you doing anything different, I don't think you'll be doing a lot different. I guess the only difference is you won't be scanning ships and like scanning subsystems of alien vessels and things. That's kind of going to be like stuff that's happening on the bridge. It's going to be more astrometry based. It's going to be focusing on stellar cartography and that sort of thing. So it's going to have a very different feel to it, and you'll have access to less things. So you won't have short range sensors in the same way that the bridge does. So the short range sensors in the astrometry lab, again, are going to be sort of stellar object focused. So you won't have things like enemy ships to scan there. Yeah, there'll be a catalogue of data. You'll be able to recall it on the bridge too, but yes, you'll have a much easier to access library of data in the astrometrics lab. procedural generation, Nemo. So the galaxy is like 99% procedural. We've got like 18 or something million stars that are from catalog data, and that's like 2 gigabytes, I think it was. I can't remember now. But that file sits in RAM the whole time, so we're basically using 2 gig of RAM to store the entire catalog of real world data, and that's just read from RAM as needed. All the rest of the galaxy is procedural, and we use like a nested seed system, so that we have like a master seed for an area, and then smaller sub seeds for like star systems, and then smaller seeds again for planets, and then we're nesting seeds so that they're all kind of dependent on one another, so that we can generate like the tiniest details but have them the same every single time. So yeah, it's all procedural generation. And the biggest thing with all of it is making sure that you only generate what you need when you need it, because big galaxy, lots of data, you really need to be very, very careful with how much you're generating at any one time. So when we're generating our galactic sectors, we generate a really, really tiny and incredibly hyper-focused amount of data to keep that generation as lag-free as possible, because we're generating something like 30,000 stars worth of data within a few seconds. So of course that needs to be like tiny amounts of data. Yes, Anassia, I think that would be good. I think we'd need some way of passing coordinates to and from the bridge. But yeah, I think that's something that's definitely needed. No worries, happy to answer. Yeah, so that was that. So the last thing we want is, where are we? So render stars, there we are. Okay, so we're adding instances of our star mesh. So I imagine what I've neglected to do is look at the material that we're using. Right, so that's that one, which is that one. Yeah. As with the rest, it's not using the right material. Of course, and we were vertex shading this one as well to try and keep the pixel cost down as much as possible. It's just a solid ball of color, so we can use it vertex shaded. Okay, we should now have stars. We have a star. Stars. So So yeah, we're missing the target ring. That's just going to be another material that's not set up properly. But yeah, but that's it basically. Other than those last few little tweaks, we should now be able to move this display anywhere we want, scale it any size we want, and it should continue to function exactly as we need it to, which is good. So we've targeted that, so let's just send that to the helm and see whether or not we're actually hooked up. Great, we are. So that's working. Now, what we don't have on the Caravella, like I said, is the autopilot. So we've got nothing here in the flight code to be able to manage this. Similarly, it doesn't have an operational FTL drive either, and that is going to require the sublight engines pushing the ship forwards, which is ultimately the like the final vision for the system, in that in order to move the ship, we have the FTL field amplifying the existing velocity, because the field itself doesn't impart velocity, it simply amplifies it. So we need to build that into this. But I think if not the next stream, then probably the one after, in terms of the Caravella streams, we should have a flyable Caravella, which should be nice. Yeah, the challenge is going to be getting the autopilot working, like I said, because of the way the Caravella now manages its sublight flight. But in the grand scheme of things, I think we are making good progress. And as you can see, it's Newtonian, so we will just drift silently through space. Okay, well, on that successful note, I think we'll call it there, as it is just gone midnight here in the UK. Yeah, so have a great week ahead, everybody, and I shall see you on Wednesday for more Magellan class fun, where we will continue to probably work on the science labs and do a bit more modelling there as well, which will be fun. Right, have a good one, everyone. Bye for now.